Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just going to give it just another second or two to allow everybody to join. Okay, let's get started. My name is Sarah Warsey, and I am the marketing lead here at Sentia. Thank you again for taking the time out to join us today. So as we know, cybersecurity and cyber resiliency are two of the most talked about subjects across all industries and businesses of all sizes. Ransomware attacks are on the rise and getting more sophisticated. Just this week, Sunwing Airlines was hit with a major breach that downed their networks, which resulted in dozens of delays and inconveniences for passengers. Today, we are here to expand on this subject and discuss why having a proper cyber resiliency strategy is so critical to sustaining business continuity and continued success. Before we get started, though, I want to introduce our keynote speaker, Christopher Vollmar, to our group. Christopher, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Chris is the principal worldwide storage data resiliency architect with IBM, and he brings over 20 plus years of experience and knowledge in high value storage and cyber resiliency solutions. Chris will take us through the various trends we are seeing today and will explain why traditional methods of protection simply are no longer enough. And questions are welcome throughout the session. Please feel free to simply type them into the chat box to your right, and we will address them throughout the session and also at the end. So with that said, let's get started. So there may be some people on the call that are not completely familiar with Sentia, so here is a quick overview of who we are and what we do. So Sentia is a high-value managed IT solutions provider with a focus on eliminating the pain and complexity of technology and giving valuable time back to our customers by acting as an extension of their team and fulfilling all of their IT management needs. We are Canadian-based, located in Richmond Hill, and we have been in operation for over 15 years now. We have a team comprised of highly skilled subject matter experts with combined average experience of over 17 years. Our specialties include, but are certainly not limited to, advanced virtualization solutions, business continuity, network and security, hybrid IT and cloud, and of course, managed services is integrated into all of the above with our expertise in designing, deploying, and managing the solutions that we sell. Last but certainly not least, we take pride in partnering with high-value technology leaders to help us customize the best solution for our clients. Please visit us at sentia.ca to learn much more and follow us on social media. We are active on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram for regular updates. So with that said, I'd like to pass it over to Chris. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. And I'm going to talk us through for the next little while, kind of the conversations around cyber resiliency and a little bit around how we protect our data. So yeah, as Sarah mentioned, please feel free to add questions into the question panel. We've got a couple of the IBM team and Sentia team manning the question panel. And as we go through, you might actually even see us kind of address some of them. And certainly if there's any that don't get touched, we'll touch at the end during the question session. So, you know, Sarah did a really good job of setting this up. And I don't know if there's much I can add because it's so topical in the news right now. There's my day-to-day. Like, you know, we're all very much, especially after the last 2 years, we're all very much focused on what we're doing in our day-to-day. How do we keep the lights on? How do we keep things going? How do we pivot and deal with all of the changes that have been thrown at us in the last couple of years? But then there's the stuff that keeps me up at night or keeps us up at night. It keeps those of us in the industry up at night. And fortunately, Sarah did a great job setting this up. If you're watching the news, this is unfortunately a regular news occurrence. And I think for those of us in the Toronto GTA area, it's maybe even more acute just because of the proximity to Pearson Airport and everything that's been going on. It's big picture, it's hard not to notice this as part of the situation that we're going to have to deal with in IT for the next foreseeable future. If you even look at things like World Economic Council, World Economic Forum, they produce a report every year about some of the largest threats, and ransomware / cybercrime is on both their 2 to 5 year horizon and their 5+ year horizon, and that's a structure, or it's a survey built out of kind of world leaders that do that Davos event every year and are part of the World Economic Forum. If you look at anything, all of the numbers, and there are a variety of reports, the likelihood of a data breach in the next 2 years tends to look at like 1 in 3. Never more poignant than the conversations, if you're following the news, to what Sarah mentioned earlier today and started coming out yesterday. The loss of productivity is massive. I've had friends in other organizations or neighbors and whatnot and go through this, and yeah, they're down for days. The average recovery rate from the data we're seeing, at least from the survey and the information we're seeing on people that report, is up to 23 days to recover after a ransomware attack. The struggle of this is the bad actors, the threat actors, I'll use kind of both terms at times interchangeably, know what to go looking for, know how to cause a lot of trouble, and then also know how to make our businesses very, very difficult during that situation. You sort of see some in the notes here as well, as they do go after crucial systems. Once they gain entry, they start looking for crucial systems. They've also figured out that backups are a prime target, and for the for leading up to the last couple of years, backups was one of the primary places we all looked at. It is absolutely a target of threat actors going out looking for your backups, going out looking for ways to injure or impede your backup before they go after the primary system, and then they go after the primary data sets. So it's looking like, how do I knock it? They figured out, how do I knock out the thing that's going to support you before I then start threatening you or cause real malicious challenges? As we start looking at more around ransomware, IBM X-Force produces a threat intelligence index every year. This is the latest 2022 version. Couple of things, like there's a little bit of bright news. North America is only the 3rd most attacked region worldwide. It's still not a good thing for us. That being said, when you look at both the global and North America numbers, ransomware makes up 21%. Now, don't belie that number. When you look at the rest of the bar chart in there, and from context is king here, the rest of the threats and issues are all 5, 10, 6, 7, 8%. They're all relatively small on the bar chart, and then there's kind of a big one that says other. That was also a big catch-all for other kind of undefined. But ransomware is still by far the top attack type, and we don't see that changing in the next little while. In fact, we see that probably becoming more and more challenging for us. They do go after, in North America, there is a focus that comes on professional services going at it. Second place is professional services. Retail, wholesale comes in as well. Manufacturing, and that's been a very, very big topic, has been kind of the primary one. The other thing to think about is, and we'll talk through this and touch on this as we go through, is impact to my associated businesses. And again, I'm trying not to pick on the one that's in the news right now, but you start to see, there's multiple suppliers involved, or there's a supplier involved, there's the primary company, there's a bunch of things here that you think about that being able to not only impact you because of the data breach, but also impact the vendors you rely on and the partners you work with all the time because of a data exfiltration or a data attack or a data breach, is certainly a tactic that the ransomware gangs and the ransomware organizations are looking at. What makes it even more nebulous is, they kind of split and reform, as you sort of see every 17 months. So even keeping an eye on the big bad actors, often they split and reform into new groups. So it is this constantly sliding scale of threat and challenges we're trying to deal with. One of the things I like to kind of highlight for us and talk through, and what we find to kind of draw the differences, cybersecurity is kind of not where I'm looking today. It is very important. It is investments that you and all of our clients have made for years and need to continue to make around cybersecurity. And that is very much about, if I paraphrase, it's about keeping the bad actors out, and it's about catching them if they get in. That is absolutely a key and critical part of a resilient architecture. Now, I will say that is different, however, from cyber resiliency. And we look at it from a perspective of both need to work hand in hand. There needs to kind of be this hand in glove kind of situation, because cyber resiliency is the ability for the organization to continue to function, restore data, and come back into function in the event of an attack. And if the numbers are, from everything we're seeing, numbers are right, 1 in 3 chance of being attacked, all of the numbers that say the likelihood is very high. How do I minimize the damage? And then how do I recover from that damage as quickly as possible? That's where cyber resiliency kicks in. That's really where our focus is. But I also want to delineate that that's not necessarily the same as we've always done around business continuity. That's not the same as we've always done around disaster recovery. So there are a separate set of discussions there, but they are intertwined. And you're going to see here, or at least I'd like to make the point here, that cyber resiliency is and overlaps with things like disaster recovery. So practices, tooling, procedures we've done for years in disaster recovery, there's some overlap. Business continuity, which we've all said for years has overlaid with disaster recovery. Yes, same idea. Picks up some of the tools, picks up some of the process, picks up some of the procedures. And the sweet spot is when all three interrelate. But unfortunately, one doesn't necessarily replace the other, and I can't do the job of one versus the other. Like the simplest example I can give you in the situation of, say, a disaster recovery, where I'm replicating data from site 1 to site 2, or business continuity, I'm replicating data from site 1 to site 2, active, so I could be hot on both sides, or even I have a bigger RPO, RTO, I'm just doing a DR site, maybe my DR site's in the cloud. The challenge being, if the data gets corrupted, you're just going to replicate the bad bits over. So the traditional practices I'd have around DR of, okay, system's down, let's restore, go to the latest backup, go to the latest copy, go to the latest app, async or synchronous mirror copy, it's crash consistent, start my recovery process, come back up. The problem is it was current up until, say, a minute ago or 5 minutes ago or whatever my delta is. I probably still have data corruption. And now I'm still dealing with, okay, even if I've rolled logs forward and I'm able to get into the database, I probably have a corrupted database because of the ransomware. This is where cyber resiliency starts to come in, because I need to think about which tools and processes can I use, which tools and processes do I need to add, because one doesn't fix the other. My classics examples of DR and business continuity don't fix the other. And to that other example of backup, still very key, still very important. But the threat actors have figured out that we'd be using backup and now go after that as well. I start to draw out that a little bit more when we talk about, well, what do we normally have? When I look at data resiliency, well, what I normally have is I'd have replication, like I talked about. I'd have error detection. I'd make my RPO. My business would have identified RPO and RTO targets. But what happens if they're compromised? What happens when the data is compromised? Do I have any isolation? Well, generally everything's connected. I don't normally put in things like air gap, and my recovery scope is different. But what do I need to think about is, how do I manage that in this context? How do I manage that if the data could get corrupted at a point? How do I manage that if I want to create multiple recovery points, because I may not have noticed the breach, I may not have noticed the ransomware attack until it started hitting me. It may have started in one system that didn't get picked up for a little while, but then got picked up later and has propagated through different points. How do I recover them into different points where, I may have lost one system 2 hours ago, but the other system I only lost an hour ago. Where do I find my recovery points the right way, and then test them to make sure they're clean? Now, also, can I bring in things like air gapping? Can I bring in things like isolation so that I have a copy of data sets that are separated and isolated? So in the case that I can't recover, or so in the case that I didn't have a kind of an incremental recovery structure, certain data is air gapped and protected for long-term retention. And then also, how do I think about that idea of around forensic recovery? How do I look for be able to surgically remove the bad files and then maybe come back into production? All of that stuff doesn't necessarily come in a normal DR process. All of that stuff isn't things we have probably run books for today, but it's things we want to think about to build our run books. Now, I think about what happens, and the boom is the kind of thing when public notification happens in a ransomware attack. But if I think about where we're at, I want to do the error. I want to build all my cybersecurity defenses on the left side of that boom. But I also want to think about my planning and my procedures on the left side of the boom, the before the boom, the threat prevention, and that's where I build my cyber resiliency practices. So that if something happens, goodness forbid, on the right side of the boom, the after the crisis, and as I'm going through a response, how do I get back as fast as I can? Because as you sort of start to see, things like stolen encrypted data, things like outages. How do I find that clean copy? The time starts ticking and we all start working at a faster pace. Sometimes that means I'm making errors. Sometimes that means just we're all mainlining coffee to get through the day. But But the longer I go, the more challenges I have. So you want to think about ways to do that protection and build your plan so that you've got availability, you've got maybe containment, you've got a way to eradicate the data, you've got an air gap for certain copies that need that kind of air gap, or key core data that might be archivable. But I want to be able to think about planning for, I want to be able to think about acting on the right side of the boom. I want to do my planning on the left side of the boom, so that I'm more comfortable and I'm ready to roll into procedure. You don't want to be writing those run books during the time, and you certainly want to have as many of the pins in place as you can ahead of time. Now, from a data resiliency strategy, that's where I do a lot of my planning. So I'm doing all my planning on the left side of that time. On the left side of that time, I'm getting, building up just like I would normally for we've done for years around DR and business continuity. I go through a similar think through process, I almost use a design thinking process in some of those respects. But being able to then define my strategy, define what my RPOs and RTOs are, because they are often different than per se the RPOs and RTOs that we've probably signed off on in our normal DR procedure, right? I might have a 4-hour RPO or a 1-day RPO or RTO or something to that effect. Well, if I can't access the data, I can't start any of that runbook work, which would have gotten me to the 24-hour, say, recovery time objective. So I want to really start to step back and kind of go through maybe a design thinking process around, well, what's my recovery objective? Which data types do I need immediately? Like, this is one of the ones that we tend to spend a lot of time on when we're in that discussion is, I tend to want to categorize those data types. Now, I'm going to use a term that maybe isn't the one you hear every day, but I use terms like, or I'll use terms in thinking about it like MVC, my minimum viable company. What systems do I need just to be able to be up and take orders, to be up and serve clients? What systems do I need to be able to run that don't require me to, kind of key core function that don't require me be on paper and pencil? And then the other ones, like, we'll categorize those through there. So, the ones we always pick on are like dev, test, and UAT. Do I need that in my cyber resiliency strategy? It'd be nice to have, but I don't need as close an RPO probably on my dev, test, UAT as I would on my production. So I might have that as set aside later down my line. That might be, okay, I'm willing to give that one 3 days. I'm willing to lose 3 days of dev, test, UAT if I got hit, but I can't lose 3 days of say production order taking data or client data or patient data or something like that, because of how the business operates or how the company operates. So I want to define, I want to create those workflows. This is the other part of it. I want to think about building those workflows. So how am I restoring? How am I checking? How am I doing the surgical recovery on the data? Build your procedures, build your protection, classify, categorize. Not always necessarily the most fun, a lot of paper exercise here, but it also means that we're really thinking through what's the most important, which LUNs are the most important LUNs, which volumes are the ones I got to protect, and then which ones are others. And then, in the case of, where I've got my environment virtualized, where are they all living inside of which VMDK, inside of which grouping? So I just have a sense of where everything's run to. And then monitor and maintain. I've been in enough time. We've been in enough situations where, the run book's got a little dust on it, or the DR book's got a little dust on it. As new workloads come in, I got to go through that regular procedure in case one of them turns out to be a new one that becomes key to my minimum viable company. From there, I tend to think about, how do I protect it? Which tools and capabilities do I already have on hand that I maybe haven't thought of using in ways like this before? And then some of those are where can I augment out as well? So I use this curve, kind of those of us who've been around long enough have seen the old classic curve around DR. I use this and think about, okay, so which tooling do I have today? Things like backups that can then also write to worm or an enter, things that can be air gapped. I can write to air gap. How do I leverage things like snapshotting? How do I then augment some of the tooling I have in my snapshot environments? Are there extra tools on my environment that I don't have that would then get me closer to the ability to come back up faster, right? So the data accessibility, that red to blue is how hot's the data? Is it really current or is it really not current? If I look at the two extremes here, the policy governed or the storage aware snapshots, I want to think about those as that's my order applications, or the things that process my business, that are taking orders and moving things, or key to core and patient data if I was in healthcare. To keep that thread, the cold data vault, the worm data archives on tape maybe, that's long-term retention. That's keep the healthcare example. That's X-rays. That's long-term data that I can't lose and I need to have, but isn't changing on a kind of hourly or daily basis. If I was in academia, that's my research. That's the last 25 years of my research. I'm going to deep archive that as one of my approaches, air gap it, and probably put it into a whole set of isolations, simply because that stuff is very much irreplaceable. And I may not have in academia, I may not have as much transactional workload on the administration side where I'm taking registrations. But I want to think about, once I've started to categorize my data, which tools and which procedures and how fast do I need that data back? I'm going to start thinking about how I want to place it and work with it. In a cyber incident, we look at cyber attack, a cyber attack detection and recovery. I'm going to walk you through what we normally see, and this kind of goes to that 23-day example. The idea of it takes up to 23 days to recover. So the biggest point tends to be detect is once you see it, respond and recover are the largest parts. Now, the point I'll make here is this is a bit logarithmic, so the scale is a little bit different because it's logarithmic. But really, you're going through a situation of identify the initial compromise. You may not notice it out of the gate, and they often, you'll see things about the bad actors have been in the network for a while. True, but they may not have deployed a ransomware yet. But once they do, and once I've determined that, then it's a matter of how do I start to come back up? How do I figure out what I've got to do and what impacts those have had? What we're trying to do, and what we've been doing inside IBM Storage Camp, has very much been about how do I shorten this time. So if I'm in days to weeks to recover, how do we look at ways to help you recover in hours to days? So how do I shorten this cycle and move from this long recovery structure, which for key core systems, can't be offline for that amount of time because it starts to threaten the business dramatically. How do I shorten that cycle? Well, for us, we look at something called, we've built a framework around something called IBM Cyber Vault. I'm going to talk you through how that works as we go through. But how do I shorten that detect cycle? Then how do I shorten that respond and recover cycle with everything from automation to tooling built into the system? So I don't necessarily need to go running to backups per se for my key core data. All of those things, how do I think about looking at ways to work with copies, work with active copies of the data I can bring with, protect those copies with things like immutability so that I'm able to then bring them back, test them, and then bring them into production in a much quicker rate than if I had to necessarily run to backup. And I kind of made the point that backup is a target. The other challenge that we tend to see is, at least in a lot of environments, my backups are rigged to absorb backup. My backup environment isn't always necessarily planned to be able to do a mass restore. And if I'm working in a situation here, I'm thinking about a mass restore. I'm thinking about bringing back 5, 6, 7, 8 more systems or terabytes of LUNs to be able to bring that back online. And that's just to be able to start testing it. So the time scale here, very much in that first kind of hump, for lack of a better way to put it, was very much, I might be pulling things back from backup, so I have not only the network time to get the data out of the backup system across the network and into the subsystem, but then I have to start the testing process and figure out if the copy I just restored is one I can use, or it was also corrupted, and just because it committed to backup didn't necessarily mean the data was clean, it just meant the backup completed. So that also creates another challenge, that if I'm working only from backups, and then those backups are 1 or 2 network hops away, I've introduced a whole bunch of time before I'm able then to test and validate my environment, then I can go back into production. So one of the things that contributes to how big that scale can be is even if I've been able to protect my backups, they are a time impact to me to be able to come back up. So when we look at things like building out safeguarded copy, that's the key core for us around Cyber Vault. So to be able to build that cyber vault, I need to build it on a bunch of technology. Part of that technology, we built in something called safeguarded copy into the IBM Flash system family. So it lets me build out separation of duty. That's one thing that I haven't necessarily touched on, but when we look at threats and we look at impacts with bad actors, some of the things we bump into here, depending on the study you look at, is there's a significant amount of external, let me minimize, there is a lot of external attack vectors and a lot of external actor issues. There also is a percentage that isn't so small it's not noticeable. There's a noticeable percentage of internal threat, depending on the industry, and that can come from anywhere from disgruntled staff to the full Tom Clancy kind of spy novel-esque type of thing where people have sold credentials and sold their access levels just because it was money or because they actually had a beef or a problem. So how do I start to create some separations of duties so that not everyone has the keys to the kingdom or has the keys to, say, impact volumes, delete volumes, things like that on a subsystem. So I want to look about separation of duty to protect the data that I'm going to guard. How do I create, for us, one of our design goals is how to create protected copies of the data. So I want to be able to create copies of the data on the subsystem that are immutable. That means I can't get rid of them. That means I can't see them. That means I can't mount them. And that means admins won't even know they're there necessarily until it's time to bring them into a restoration procedure. And then the best part around speed of recovery, or the part where I'm driving towards around speed of recovery, is if I'm able to, create copies of my data throughout incremental times on the subsystem that are immutable, that means that I can also start to bring them back in and test them before I restore them, but I'm not dealing with that network hop. I'm not dealing with that lag of pulling them back from backups. If I've got copies that I'm able to work with, they're on the system, I can promote them, I can test them, and then I can bring them back into production in a faster rate. So that, for us, is is a big part of how do I shorten that long-term time, is I'm not trying to fish for backups and then pull them back in any kind of mass restore structure or orderly restore because I have a network limitation about write data in one direction. I can immediately start engaging them, working with them, and seeing if they're valid copies for me to work with. So if I take a little bit deeper look at safeguarded copy, and you'll see I now mark this for safeguarded copy for open system storage. We do that because this is a lot of the technology we've been working with in mainframe for a number of years now. So certainly we were able to leverage some best practices from the mainframe development and the mainframe storage development team and able to bring that into our open systems offerings as well. So it isn't necessarily our first go at stuff. We've been doing this already for a number of years. It's something we've been able to bring in now to the open systems and have had an open system since last year as well. But if I look at my production system with my production volumes, I'm able to then create kind of this child pool construct where I'm able to take multiple copies automated through policy govern and take them throughout the day. So I'm not noticing it, my administration isn't noticing, it's happening when I set up the policy structure, and I'm able to make multiple copies. We call them safeguarded copies. I'm able to make these multiple copies inside the environment and inside the storage system, and I'll keep them for a retention amount of time. Tend to be what I see in the market right now. We see customers keeping them for 5 or 7 days that are on the system. I might take multiple copies in a day. I've got some clients that are going to take 2 copies a day, simply because then they're going to mix that with a backup strategy. And I've got my first and multiple lines of defense, very much our classical, how do I build the castle and build up all the lines of defense. But in the example here, we've taken 5 copies throughout the day. So I've got these 5 copies today. Now, if something happens, for example, the boom, as we were talking about, I've got a corruption found, I've got ransomware deployed, I've got something happen. You're able to then mount those volumes. We call them recovery volumes. We were doing this in the lab again the other day. Mount it up to a different host. This is what I prefer. I prefer bring it up into a different host and look for that data and see if it's mountable and usable. Now, I want to think about ways you can also protect that. And think about ways that you also want to be able to do with that. This is kind of effectively where I have my virtual clean room, for lack of a better put it. So bring back that recovery volume, attach a host to it, and see what I've got, and hopefully bring some testing tooling. So that first one wasn't any good. Uh-oh, that's a problem. Let me bring back the next one. Oh, let's see if that next one was any good. Nope, that next one wasn't any good either. All right, let me try the next one. Let me roll back a little bit further. Turns out that in this case, our third one was good. Great, so I've gone through the process of checking, and that's not manually here, but I've gone through the process of checking those volumes to make sure that there weren't any signatures in there. I didn't have corruption, the table spaces, everything was clean. Great, now I can bring that back into production. I'm doing all of this on the subsystem. So I'm not hopping the network, I'm not doing a master store of the data. I've got the copies living as immutable, and I'm gonna call them hidden, copies on the IBM flash system. Once I've tested them, then I can revert them back into production. And I can come back up. So the other part of how do I come back up in that kind of shorten the response time from hours, from days to weeks to hours to days, I've at least got the ability now to bring those, previous copies up, check them, and then bring them back into production when I'm ready. So it allows me to then build from there to figure out, okay, I've got a clean valid of my data, and I'm able to work with it. To the point of the copies being hidden and immutable, two reasons we've done that. One, and we're both threat-based. One, external bad actors that try to gain access won't see it. Internal bad actors can't get to it unless they have a certain level of access. Also, that also means those LUNs can't be mounted to hosts and no other hosts can touch them. That's important. And then also because I'm time-based managing them, I've got the ability to then manage how long I want to keep them for and build all that around policy structures. But I'm not able to touch them or work with them until I trigger them into the recovery volume through another piece of say orchestration software, which also gives me another level of separation of duty and another level of separation to be able to guard against both internal and external breaches. Now, from there, I said we built CyberVault based on the IBM safeguarded copy technology. So, for us, the step one was let's build the safeguarded copy technology. Let's build the ability to come on in and make copies and be able to, as you see my Slack coming in, be able to come up. I thought I turned Slack off. Apparently, Slack came back up on me. Either way, CyberVault gives me the ability to then automate and build a process. So I build the basics around my safeguarded copy, and which has my flash copy technology. Now for CyberVault is a process I built around that. And this is very much something we work with our IBM Lab services around us. So I'll touch my production data. I'm able to then create my safeguarded copies, just like you saw a few minutes ago on that last slide. So I'm protecting the data with my safeguarded copies. From there, I tend to build the vault. And this is that quote unquote clean room. Now I've got clients that do this on their DR environment. I've got clients that have extra cycles that kind of build their virtual clean room. Now this comes into how much network separation do I want to have. There's a lot of discussion and consulting on how I want to build some of that vault. I can build in things like proactive monitoring. I'll talk you through that in a second, so that I do get a little bit more heads up it's coming. But once I've kind of built my place, where would I test and restore? I can build my cyber vault that way. I want to bring in things like, my tooling that would be specific to my application to help me look for, say, ransomware or scan engines, antivirus, all of those things that I would then mount the volumes. I want to build a testing process around that. Part of this is building your recovery plan. Part of this is building your validation plan. Part of this is building the internal muscle memory, for lack of a way to put it with my own team, around how to be able to do that testing process. So if I can protect the data, then I can produce those volumes in for me to be testing. I can bring the tooling I need to test it. So, ransomware scanning engines, things like that, antivirus, all those things, tools that my application vendors, Oracle's got some tooling as well, they would have for you. Be able to bring that, scan those applications, build my process around them. And then from there, I want to automate. So that top part is probably where it takes the longest to get there, depending on where you're at with automation in your organization. But if I can get all the way there, and I like, as you sort of see, this builds in steps. Very much, how do I build this in steps around the process and around the cyber vault, so that I can then kind of do all these things, and when I get to that level of automation, it becomes an automatic thing for me where I'm regularly checking volumes. I'm regularly promoting volumes to be checked. I'm not removing them from the safeguarded copy tree, but I'm bringing them up, I'm having them checked, I'm automating as much of that checking as I can, and I've got them ready to be promoted back into production immediately. So as you kind of maybe seen in the last idea with just using safeguarded copy, some of that's going to be some manual work. Our idea around CyberVault is how do I automate as much of that and then incorporate some of the external tooling that I might want to use as well. So now for us, what do I look at as CyberVault? I look at it as a blueprint for automation a lot of the ways. So I can build the proactive monitoring. So I'll start with, I've taken the immutable copies with the Flash system. I can build the proactive monitoring. Now there's some different ways you can build the proactive monitoring. IBM Storage Insights, which we generally have a lot of our clients leveraging for the Flash system, has some reports and has some alerts you can put in. You can integrate with your SIEM. If you don't have a SIEM, IBM QRadar is an awesome SIEM to look at as well, but you can build in automation into your SIEM. Test and validation, very much let's bring some forensic tooling, let's see what you have access to, let's see what you would normally use, but how do I build that into the process by which I'd promote those copies? And then rapid recovery comes into that automation. How do I build any automation I need around there? because one volume is one thing. 15 or 30 volumes is an entirely different thing. So the reason I want to look towards those, automation of the test and validation, and automation of the recovery is it's one thing to do one volume for one host. It's a different thing to do 30 volumes and then across 10 or 15 different hosts. All of that thing, that's where I start to see the need for the automation. So with that, talk a little bit about Cyber Vault and safeguarded copy so far. I want to make the point that safeguarded copy, it's built on the IBM Flash system family. So if you're used to our IBM Flash system family, or if you haven't seen an update from us in a while, part of the team at Sentia, more than happy to come and give you an update on what are we doing with the IBM Flash system family. I'm going to highlight, in this case, 3 of our NVMe-based flash systems, the IBM 5200, 7300, 9500 family. As you notice, we kind of double in use space and actually number of drives every one of those iterations. So that 5200 is a 1U system. I love the form factor of it. I really love the form factor of it. The 7300 is a 2U form factor, one we're all pretty used with, and the 9500 for us is now a 4U form factor. It can carry up to 48 drives of NVMe capability, of NVMe space. Now you've noticed I've also highlighted here in red some of the technologies that we're able to do that are maybe a little more security focused. So I can do Cyber Vault with any of these. All of these carry safeguarded copy. So if I have safeguarded copy, that means I could build a Cyber Vault. They also have things like multi-factor authentication in 8.5 code stream. And when you get to the 9500, there's a couple other security focused elements besides MFA as well that we want to highlight. But all of this means I can build my cyber resiliency off any of these 3 systems and be able to do it on my production, my DR, however I want to leverage it. Now, the other thing I'll make the point on the IBM Flash system family is those 3 I just mentioned, the 5200, 7300, 9500, they're all based, and they all have the ability to be based on the IBM Flash Core technology. So IBM Flash Core modules, I will use a coffee analogy here because I'm kind of a coffee drinker. Sometimes I want to know, or in some cases I want to know everything from the where the bean came from or how the bean came from all the way up to actually how it got to the cup. This is one of those ones that I think we look at innovation, and we do innovation with our IBM Flash Core modules from that very beginning. We work from the very beginning working with the Flash vendor who creates the Flash for us, all the way into the delivery of the drive, and all the way in through the innovation cycle there, and into the innovation cycle into the IBM Flash system, that we are delivering difference for our clients. We're not necessarily using, industry standard NVMe drives. Yep, they're an option on the Flash system, absolutely. But we're bringing some different unique technology, A, around building in data compression on the drive. So I'm not even doing it in the software stack. B, around being able to do things like encryption. And then you're going to see that, if you spend some time, there's some really interesting differences we've been able to build into that Flash system and leveraging technology that, provides some price advantages for our clients around why the Flash Core modules are very different in the industry than some of the other things. So for us, it's about how do we build intellectual property and do research and do innovation in storage, not just from the storage subsystem up into the host, but very much from the drive into the subsystem, into the host. So I kind of look at that from a coffee, from how do I get from the bean to the grind, to the roast, to the cup. Now, as I build these systems, I still want to keep in mind things like DR, cyber resiliency, and business continuity. So I can do traditional 2 or 3 site replication. So I can have 2 sites high availability with 1 site out of zone if I want to. All of those are the 5200 if I wanted. So all 3U of space, and I've built it into 3 different locations. Things like Hyperswap for that high availability. I can do enhanced availability across multiple sites, but all of them have the ability to deliver safeguarded copy. So that means I can build Cyber Vault around them, and I can do the immutable air gap copy. So I've got the ability to provide some cyber resiliency, even if it's safeguarded copy. Even if I'm just doing a safeguarded copy as step 1, I can do cyber resiliency across those systems and build that into all of my recovery and availability processes. And right back to that kind of 3-ball Venn diagram we started out with of how do I build DR, business continuity, and also think about cyber resiliency technologies as a part of that. And then overall in the IBM Flash system, across the Flash systems family, we're going to think about snapshotting. We're going to think about working with recovery VMs and containers, integrating with things like VMware and OpenShift, being able to then create replications. In some cases, am I going to replicate the data to the cloud and leverage things like IBM Spectrum Virtualize for public cloud? And then again, once I've got these volumes, and even if I've build my cyber vault structure and then increase automation or include some automation that lets me even, mount the volume and then maybe back up a copy of the volume so I've got it off the system. I can even still go to tape if I need to. So there's lots of ways to create another level of air gap, and depending on how many levels we want to build, we can even still deal with tape. So while we talk about things like air gap and being able to be immutable on the subsystem, there's still the IBM tape family. Still something I work with on a regular basis as I'm building out end-to-end solutions with our client family, is being able to even leverage tape. So there's one thing that I kind of thought I'd highlight while we were here. In my day-to-day life cycle, like I said, still work with tape. The IBM TS 4300, again, small. So the 5200 was a 1U. This is 3U, but I can get 40 slots. I can start at 3U and grow it from there, but I can get to 720 terabytes of capacity inside that library. So I've got the ability to then now do end-to-end from on the box into the backup family, into a deep archive, into things like tape and make, worm immutable copies on tape to protect my data from kind of production to backup into archive. Lots of room to work with. And yeah, the IBM tape family, interestingly enough, we're just as busy with tape as we've kind of always ever been, if not more so, because of well, frankly, everything we've talked about so far today. So where do I start? Cyber resiliency being a thing, cyber resiliency be something I want to think about, cyber resiliency being, something I haven't come to before. I need to start getting a place to start. That's generally where we start helping a lot of our clients. Well, between IBM and IBM Sentia, we're able to offer something called the Cyber Resiliency Assessment. The CRAT is our short form, because we come up with a way to short form everything. But what it is a 2-hour discussion. I don't deploy any tools. This isn't a invasive procedure, but this is very much a discussion-driven engagement where part of the IBM team sits down with our clients. We talk through over that kind of 2-hour session, kind of the main concepts around cyber resiliency, and it's very question-based. So we're going to come with a bunch of questions. We're going to walk you through them. We build this around the NIST framework. So this isn't anything proprietary from IBM. We built our questions based on NIST framework. Now we took our knowledge from both IBM security team, a little bit of knowledge from the IBM storage team, a little bit of knowledge from the IBM X-Force team, and built this kind of questionnaire structure, interview discussion, where you'll be able to then say, okay, following this framework, let's talk about those 5 different elements: identify, protect, respond, recover, and then understanding what you're doing today and kind of where you're at in different places. So I'm doing this I'm partway there, we're most of the way there, we completed this part, we thought about this already, and it creates a scoring for us that we're able to turn back. This doesn't actually provide anything from a, hey, you should buy this IBM thing per se, but it does give you a whole bunch of recommendations based on kind of the conversation, discussion, and the questions we heard, and then also provides like I said, a pretty good looking executive level report that says, hey, I've got some real strength in these sessions. You look at that kind of spider graph in the bottom right corner. I got some real strength in some of these sections, but I got some places I want to improve in other ones. We will make recommendations. They're going to be non-product based recommendations, but we will make recommendations. And I'll tell you, having done a bunch of these across Canada and in North America, very much part of the time is very process based. We've had some very good conversations with clients that, coming out of the discussion, coming out of the questions that we've come out of there, have very much been, hey, there are some process things that I think you could help that would massively improve your score. And if you think about that, this is one of those ones our clients have used as a point in time. So we'll come in, we'll spend the 2 hours, we'll deliver the report, and we'll walk you through it with the recommendations. But then we might come back in 6 or 9 months and do it again, and you can sort of see your score from before to later. Hey, I did improve in the purple section or the orange section. And I still got some work to do in some other ones. So, kind of having that numerical based score structure and kind of major minor recommendations helps our clients start to orient around, well, what are my procedures? What things do I want to work on? How do I prioritize certain things I know I got to do, but what's an outside person's point of view, and what should I prioritize for? So anyway, this is absolutely something that's available for us. I'm going to let Sarah talk us through a little bit as well, but something we can come in and do for you with the IBM and the Sentia team. So now with that, I'm going to ask, did we have any questions that showed up in the chat that didn't get addressed? And then Sarah's going to talk to us a little bit about coffee as well. So I'm going to let Sarah come off mute if she does. There she is.
So just 2 things about the assessment. There's no cost to leverage it. That's an important point that we want to highlight. And also, you don't have to be running IBM infrastructure to leverage it. Chris, am I correct in mentioning that? Okay, perfect.
100%. Well done.
Yes, so no cost, and it's very versatile in that sense that if you're not running IBM currently, that's no problem. You can still take advantage of it. So yes, if there are any questions, now is the time to ask. And also, this is a lovely photo of what all of our attendees will be receiving in the mail in the coming days. This is Backroad Coffee Roasters. Chris, do you have a bit of background on this local business of ours?
Yeah, as I say, it is a local business. They're actually based out of Mississauga. They're not far. If you're in Mississauga, they're actually down off Lakeshore in the Port Credit area. They're a little bit behind of things. It's not like they're right on on Lakeshore. But yeah, they're a small business, and everything we've gone through the last couple of years. When I'm in the area, like I'll stop in and and grab a cup of coffee from them because it, everything I can do to support a small and local business, I think is awesome. So these guys make a nice cup of coffee. So I was super happy when I bumped into it, and the Sentia team also saw the opportunity for us to work with local business and help some of the local community.
Excellent. No, thank you. Thank you for that. So yes, so again, these will be delivered via mail in the coming days. So please keep an eye out for that. We do have one question. Let's see here. Can you make the devices high available across sites?
Yes, there's a way to totally do high availability across sites. Depending on the level of availability you want, there's everything from the ability to do hyperswap, meaning I can be active on both sites. I could lose one site and still be able to support it, and the system wouldn't notice. The hosts wouldn't notice if you set the hosts up the right way. There's actually a way to do it with IBM Lab Services where there's some guarantees that come along with that as well. There's also the ability to just make them available through regular replication from site to site. So depending on the level and connection between the sites, how active you want to be, totally that capability. And if you're in that flash system, sort of 5200, 7300, 9500 family, you can also use your safeguarded copy capability on them as well. So they can be active, and still be making your safeguarded copies at the same time. So you kind of build in your high availability and some cyber resiliency into the platform design as well.
Perfect, thank you. I don't see any other questions at the moment.
All right, well, in that case, I'll bring us down. Sarah, you wanted to point us towards here as well, right?
Yes, this is our Sentia storefront at ibm.com. It's a co-branded page, which again reiterates much of what Chris touched on. It's an opportunity to further explore all of the IBM's Flash portfolio. You can customize configurations, you can request a demo, and there's also a button at the top where you can request the CRAT, the Cyber Resiliency Assessment tool that we just talked about. So we will send a link to this after the session as well for you to take a deeper look at it. But this is just a quick snapshot for you to get an idea of how it looks.
Awesome. And with that, I think that takes us to our last slide where everyone, thank you for your time today. Thank you so much for sitting with us and staying with us throughout the whole session. This was, I hope, very helpful for you and gave you some points of view and some things you hadn't seen before. And thank you to Sarah, thank you to Chris, thank you to the Sentia team for hosting with us.
Oh, and thank you, Chris, for being our keynote speaker. I think it was excellent. We hope that everybody on the call enjoyed the session and found it very insightful and informative. And yes, if you have any questions, if you'd like to have some follow-on discussions on the CRAT and anything else that was talked about, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself and Chris West, and we will be happy to set something up. And again, look out for your lovely coffee packets in the mail in the coming days. And once again, thank you so much for joining and have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Bye.